مصلحا ومجددا فارنوا بنظر طاهر وجناني.
Assalamu Alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu, dear viewers. With us today we have our beloved brother Ali Murtaza from North Carolina. Assalamu Alaikum, dear brother.
Wa alaikum salam rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. How are you?
Alhamdulillah, how are you, brother?
By the grace of Allah, alhamdulillah, surviving in this pandemic, but it's alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah. So, dear brother, our first question for you today is, what is your name and background?
My name is Ali Murtaza. I am originally from North Carolina. Right now I reside in New York City in the Bronx. And my background is that, like, I grew up in the South. You might call it in the Bible Belt area. All of my relatives, my whole background is based on Baptist Christians. And as a child, we were the type of Baptist Christians, whereas we had prayer services on Wednesday night, Friday night, and Sunday. You started out with Sunday school, and you ended up, after the sermon was over and the preacher had a good sermon, then you might not get out of church until about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So as a child, it was a little bit, it kind of tended on your wear. But in my background, you could not groan, or you couldn't talk back to the elders, so you had to keep that discomfort to yourself, else you'll find a different kind of discomfort that could come your way.
Okay, so dear brother, our second question is that you were following Christianity before Islam. So how did you hear about Islam, and what made you accept Islam, Ahmadiyyat in specific?
That's a long journey. It starts when I, migrated from my home that I was living in the South at the age of 14. And I came to Atlantic City because that's where my mom lived, and I wanted to be with my mother. And from that aspect of it, I stayed in Atlantic City up until the time I went into the military. And I went into the military 1970, and went into the United States Navy. And after coming out of the United States Navy, my mom had passed away during that time in Atlantic City. So I didn't really have so much of a pull to come back to Atlantic City, because she was the only family, blood relation that I had in Atlantic City, even though I had numerous friends. But my closest friend came into the military with me at that time on a buddy system. So, it was no reason that I could, that kind of brought me back to Atlantic City. And then I came into New York City, where I still am. In that time period is where my journey starts to come towards Ahmadiyyat, because as I mentioned, I grew up in the South, so all my history from religion is based on Christianity. But as a child, or as a kid, I did have some deep questions about, about Christianity, because I was like, I was really like one of those kind of kids, or at least in my family, all the kids, participated in the church. So in my participation, I had to basically take the minutes, so to speak, from the different events. And on one occasion, I had asked the pastor about Jesus, and I asked him, I said, what, because it puzzled me. I says, like, Elder, I said, Jesus died on the cross, right? He said, yes. And I said, well, like, when Jesus died on the cross, what happened to him? Because if he was God, how can God die? And he said, well, you got to understand, son, that Jesus is the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. God is all wrapped up into one. I said, yeah, but if he died on the cross, how is it that he still lives? And he gave me an answer that didn't quite satisfy my curiosity. So that question kind of like rolled around in my psychic, for all those times. And when I came to Atlantic City during that time after the military experience, my mother's best friend told me that I should look up her son because he lived in New York. And when I took her advice, I looked up her son, whose name is Akbar Musafiri Tashaka. He basically, contacted. Well, when I contacted him, he says, "Yeah, I would like to meet you." He says, "Why don't we go out to dinner?" I said, "Fine." So we went out to dinner, and like the first time I ever had Indian food in my life, and loved it. And during that conversation, he asked me, "Did I know anything about Islam?" And I told him, "No, not really." I said I knew about it from, just from high school when they talk about the Moors, and to that extent, that was it. So he says, like, "Let me give you this book." He says, like, then after you read it, he said, "Let me know what you think about it." So I accepted it graciously, and the book that he gave me was The Philosophy and Teachings of Islam. And from that night, that sparked my journey in learning about Islam. Now, mind you, I was not familiar with any of the terminology that the book explained, but something about it kept drawing me back to it. And I think mainly because it was gifted to me by Brother Akbar, and like like any gift, you treasure it. And at the same time, I wasn't too, he and we didn't live in proximity. I mean, in New York City, he lived in one part of New York in the Chelsea, New York section, and at the time, I was living in the Bronx. So, even though we met up that first time, we probably didn't see each other often, except intermittently, or off and on for a number of months, and that months turned into years. The long and short of it is, it took me about 3 years to finish The Philosophy and Teachings of Islam. But that journey in finishing it in that 3-year period, everything that hinged on the concept of Islamic teachings it developed a thirst in me. So I was always going to bookstores, and every time I saw a book on Islam, I would pick it up. And like most of the literature that I could find was basically on like the Sufi writers that had been translated into English, like Jalaluddin Rumi and Ibn Arabi, and and to mention a few of them, Sheikh Imam Ghazali, some of his books. And so I got it, and Inayat Khan. So I got into a lot of those type of readings as I was reading The Philosophy and Teaching of Islam. And this started, say, back in 1975, around that period. And during this time, I happened to get an assignment, a job, because I was out of the military. Now I got to try to find some gainful employment. And I had started out on Wall Street, but it's just something, about it. It just didn't, it didn't satisfy me. So I was reading the New York Times about an opportunity to take a job in Iran. And so I went for the interview, and got the interview, and they exactly explained to me, like, my background was what they were looking for. So I got the opportunity to go to Iran. And when I went to Iran, the first place that I landed was at a place called the Hotel Rahmatiya. Hotel Rahmatiya. Didn't have any understanding of what any of the language meant, but as I think about it even now, I said, Alhamdulillah, Allah must have had me under His wing, because the mercy was just just rolling out for me, Alhamdulillah. And during that time in Iran, I had the prayer book. I think it was this Seth, the old prayer book that had Seth Aladdin and the Aladdin brothers in the cover, showing how to perform the prayer, and also giving the concept of how the Muslim prayer was performed. So I had that book with me as I was still learning Islam, and I was, really drawn towards his teachings. And that question that I started to have, that I had about when I asked the preacher about what was God when Jesus died on the cross. All this started to come into view. Maybe I didn't have the concept or the ability to digest it at the time that it was first that I first had the question in my heart. But as time moved forward, my condition changed, and as my condition changed, so did my receptivity to the information that was coming to me also changing. And as I was learning the prayers, and I was in Iran, and I was got a chance to see Islamic culture in a different from how you might see it from television or from reading about it. It was actually learning about it and living it and seeing how the people were in that country at the same time. And I really enjoyed my time in Iran. It was I was befriended by a young man by the name of Hossein Rajabi, and during that time, he was very keen on me learning about Islam. So he would take me to all the beautiful mosques whenever there was time that permitted, because I'm supposed to be on a work assignment. But there was a lot of there was a lot of uproar. I won't say uproar. At the time, there was a certain kind of unrest in Iran, because the Shah Muhammad Pahlavi was, he was a Shah as it was called during that time. But Ayatollah Khomeini was, had this quiet revolution that was brewing. So there was some kind of things that you couldn't really talk about in public, and then at the same time, my friend Hossein Rajabi didn't want to even discuss it in private, because, to quote him, he said, "Even the walls have ears." So during this time, I was, learning about Islam in an Islamic culture, but still there was these kind of things that was going on in the Islamic culture that kind of tended on a new discovery of what was happening politically in Iran. So at this time, Hussein Rajabi told me about Ayatollah by the name of Ayatollah Mukarrami Shirazi. And this Ayatollah in particular was the Ayatollah that Hussein wanted me to meet. So one of these evenings, I was in Iran, and I got a call from Hussein Rajabi, and he says, "Mr. Ali." He had already started calling me Mr. Ali, and my name hadn't been changed at the time. But he had given me a book called the Najul Balagha of Imam Ali, and I was very keen on that book. That book is such it's a wonderful read about the sermons, the collected sermons of Hazrat Ali Raziyallahu Anhu. And as I was going through this journey of learning about Islam, I was taken by two books. One book was by Khalil Gibran called The Prophet, and the other was by this book of that Hussein Rajabi had given me, the Najul Balagha of Imam Ali. So these are two books that I'm reading simultaneously, and at the same time, I'm still diving into the philosophy and teachings of Islam. So all this is going on simultaneously as I continue my journey, and at the same time, I'm still growing as a person, because at that time I'm like about in my mid-20s. During this time when Ayatollah Mukarrami Shirazi happened to come into Tehran, where I was living, and I got the call from Hussein Rajabi, and secretly, we stealthed off to the Baitul Fatima Mosque, which was an unbuilt mosque in Tehran at the time, on the outskirts, and it was like a secret gathering. It was like it was like a hush hush thing when Sheikh, or rather, I keep calling him Sheikh, but is Ayatollah Mukarrami Shirazi, when he would come into town. And I started to find out the reason that was because he was in close proximity to Ayatollah Khomeini, and his travels had to be kind of secret, because it was almost as if he was developing an underground resistance to the royalty of the Shah. So his coming and going was kind of shrouded in secrecy. So on this particular night, when I went to Baytul Fatima Mosque and listened to the khutbah that was being given by Makaremi Shirazi, which I could not understand because it was in Farsi. And after the khutbah was over, my good friend Hussein Rajabi, he introduced me very humbly to the Ayatollah, and he said at the time my name was my name that was given to me at birth was Leonard Jones. And so when he introduced me to Ayatollah Makarami Shirazi, he said, this American, Mr. Ali, Mr. Leonard Jones, he has been studying Islam and he would like to accept Islam. So at this particular evening, the Ayatollah Makarami Shirazi, he performed my Shahada. And he asked me, what name would I like to choose? He said, because Islam is it's a beautiful religion, and it is a big family, and every family has its own names. What name have you chosen? And my friend Hussein Rajabi says, well, he has been reading the book, the Najib al-Laga of Imam Ali, and he really loves that name, Ali. So that's how Ali became my name. And at the time I was reading as I mentioned, the book by Khalil Gibran called The Prophet. And in the book, his disciple is called Murtaza, or Murtada. So my kunya that had been kind of developed was Ali Murtaza. But then when I came to understand that Hazrat Ali Radhiyallahu anhu, his name was Murtaza, and Murtada was basically a derivative of Murtaza, as it may be. It's like one more relative to the Arabic, and the other, I think, more relative to the Persian. But nevertheless, Murtaza, relative to its meaning, became much more applicable to what I felt, as it represents one who is chosen. And then I found out more about what that concept about Murtaza means in the concept of one who is chosen. So that kunya stuck with me. And as I, as my time from Iran changed, and I came back to America because the assignment had come over, had finished, and I came back to America, there was, this great unrest that was going on between the concept of the war that had started between Iran and Iraq, and I was very concerned about that because I had just not recently, left there. And then also, you got the thing with Jimmy Carter and the whole thing that was going on with that. And my time in Iran was basically, and I didn't know it, but it was really hinged on that American move that was coming up, and we had to leave, we had to get out of Iran. And I didn't know it was such a rush to get out of Iran because I didn't feel that kind of a pressure, but it seemed that there was an urgency to leave, but it didn't seem there was an urgency for me because, I was just, again, on assignment. And when coming back to America, I then found out about all the things that started to unfold accordingly. So this journey to Ahmadiyyat starts, with all of these elements, and I'm trying to summarize it to such an extent, but at the same time, give some of the relevant points as it comes about, because coming back to America is where now I'm feeling Islam. I mean, Islam is in my heart. This is like it's in my fiber now. I mean, I can't breathe without the concept of Islam, about learning trying to learn the Holy Quran, and understanding who the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, who he was and what he represented, and all these things started to unfold. And then how Hazrat Ali alayhi salam, how what his Radhiyallahu anhu, how he was linked to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So all of this it's in me. It's like, you know, I'm a made man now. Islam is permeated my whole being. So coming into this, and I'm still a baby, all right, as far as, you know, the religion of Islam is concerned, I'm still a baby. So I come back to America, and I'm coming into one of the local mosques, which happened to be a Sunni mosque. Now, keep in mind, I'm coming from Shia into New York City, and I'm now coming into Sunni, and I don't know anything about the difference between Shia, Sunni, and Ahmadiyya at that time, nothing whatsoever. So I'm just a newborn baby in Islam. So I'm looking at Islam is Islam. There's no, in my mind, there's no division, no separation. So I come into a Sunni mosque, and as I'm learning how to pray, and I'm going to the mosque in Iran, the Iranians, they use what is called a moorstone. A moorstone is like a stone that is based on the soil of Mecca. And the concept that I understood from it, that the reason that the moorstone is used in the prayer, and you see all the Shias when they start to pray, at least from what I understood, the devout ones, they always have that moorstone with them. And when they go for their prayer, they take the moorstone out, and they use that as their prostration point. And the idea was that no prayer is accepted unless it's accepted on the soil of Mecca. At least that's my loose understanding of it. Maybe there's something else about it, but that was what I got from that understanding. So here I am, Shia Islam, practicing Shia Islam not knowingly in a Sunni mosque. All right. So after the prayer was over, and you know, the Shias, when they say Allahu Akbar, they also raise their hands on each time they say Allahu Akbar. So as I'm finishing up the prayer, big burly Sunni brother comes over and he says, he don't even say brother, he just says, the way you pray, we don't pray like that. He said the way you're supposed to pray correctly. You know, he was really putting it on me, you know, not even knowing nothing about me whatsoever. I'm just another brother to him. All right. But nevertheless, a brother that he is harshly admonishing without knowing anything about me. So that bit me. Oh boy, that bit me, because I'm tender. I'm tender to I'm like a newborn baby. I'm tender to be spanked. I can't be spanked like that. Not about my deen at this point, because I'm just learning. I'm just coming in. All right. So it took me away from Islam, at least my practicing of it, for a little bit of a long period of time. It was like, you know, it bothered me. And it bothered me that it bothered me, but it bothered me more that I didn't know enough. It's like saying, like, you know, you out practicing and you don't even know what you're practicing. You don't know that, like, you don't even know all the details about everything. You don't know your history. You don't know the history about Islam. And you don't know why these people are the way they are and so forth. But it didn't take away from the message of Islam, but it made me ponder. So in this pondering state of mind, you know, and this Iraq and Iran wars is coming about, like, and now me and my brother Akbar, we back on the phone. We're in contact with each other, you know, a lot more frequently than we had been in the past, because we live, you know, he's living his life, you know, he's got his life and everything, and I don't know him well. I know him enough to know that he's the son of my mother's best friend, but he and we haven't still how can I say it? We have not developed that kind of relationship that we are seeing each other every weekend or every month or whatever the case may be. So it was a long period of time between the time Akbar and myself had gotten together. Even though when I came back to America from Iran, we did spend a little bit of time, but not, you know, a lot of time. And then after that, time passed. So the Iran-Iraq war is coming about. I'm still, like, you know, in this kind of lurch about how I feel about Islam, but at the same time, I feel that I still feel like I'm Muslim, but at the same time, I'm still questioning. You know, that questioning stage is on me now. It's beat me up. So there's one thing I said to myself in my heart. I said, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I says, like, I don't know if Islam is the right religion for me. I don't know if Christianity is the right religion is for me, but I do trust you to guide me in whatever I'm supposed to be about. And I rest and I resign myself to you. That was my heart prayer. And I had learned maybe like about 5 or 6 chapters of the Holy Quran, but after not practicing, I only could remember the Al-Fatiha. So all I could recite was the Al-Fatiha. And in reciting Al-Fatiha, I would conclude with that understanding. I don't know where I'm supposed to be. I don't know what religion I should follow. I resign myself to you, O Allah, to put me where I should be. So this continued in that stage until me and Akbar was talking and so forth. And then Akbar told me something quite interesting. He says, listen, he says, like, there's a Quran exhibition that's going to be at the Sheraton Hotel. He says, like, you want to go check it out coming up this Sunday? I said, sure. I said, yeah, we can do that. So at the time I was living in Brooklyn, and so we met in Manhattan and went to the Sheraton Hotel, and it was beautiful. Oh man, this Quran I mean, you got to understand, I'm not used to seeing this kind of like display of the Quran, and it was a beautiful display. You know, it was beautiful, and I loved the Quran because I had bought a Quran back with me from Iran, which I thought it was the Quran of the Quran, because it was a big, thick Quran called the Yusuf Ali Quran, and it was like it was my treasure, still is. I still have it, but I didn't know that there were so many different. I didn't know the Quran had so many different copies and how it looked, and so, but this Quran in so many different languages, you know. So this exhibition was one that was like, it just took me. It took me, and as I was going through the exhibition, a good brother, my good brother Nasir Yaz, may Allah be pleased with him, accept his sacrifice. Any Ilahi Rajun, who was, you know, he was like, you know, basically administering the exhibition at the time. And he said, listen, he says, like, you two brothers, he says, why don't you come to the mosque this next Sunday? He says, like, we have a program there. And he says, like, I'd like you to come as my guest. And so Akbar looked at me, he said, you want to come? I said, yeah, you know, definitely, you know, I can come there, inshallah. Now, I'm leaving out some other details about brothers that I had met during the time, you know, that my journey is going through and everything. But like, they have come into this concept now, because this is where, you know, Ahmadiyyat becomes real for me, becomes the understanding, and becomes the answer to that prayer that I had been praying to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala after not remembering any of the other parts of the Quran except for Fatiha, and that little prayer in my heart that, oh Allah, I resign myself to you. Place me where you think I should be, because I don't know what religion I should be in. I don't know where I should go. So here we come to the going to the mosque in New York at Beit Tuzafa. And this happened to be on March 23rd of 1991 on Promised Messiah Day. And I didn't know anything about that at the time, but this is what was going on. And like, I come into the mosque, and like, as soon as we walk in, I'm hearing all these fiery speeches. I think Irfan al-Din was just about in the middle of his presentation, and like, we're coming into it, and like, he was just giving this wonderful speech. And at the same time, when I'm coming in, I see some brothers that I hadn't seen for a while, which was brother Umar Ibrahim, who in the Bronx, he was my barber that I had been going back and forth to. And like, then there's some stories about that, which I left out. But, and then there was Nuruddin Abdul Latif, who was my dear brother, who I had been, you know, going to his house, you know, learning a little bit of Arabic here and there, which, you know, information I had left out. All these connections, all these Ahmadi brothers, and I'm surrounded with. And I don't even know that I don't even know that they're Ahmadis. I don't even know so much about Ahmadiyyat to the extent that I could say I can make a distinction. But on this day, March 23rd of 1991, this distinction comes about. And the way it came about was when I'm sitting here listening to all the speeches, and President Nasser Yaz, he comes to the podium, and as he's making the concluding remarks, and he says to the Jamaat, he says, like, there are two members of the Jamaat that has been away from the Jamaat for quite some time, and I would like for you to welcome them. And when he said that, I whispered to my brother Akbar. I said, Akbar, I says, like, I think he thinks that I'm an Ahmadi, but I'm I said, I'm not an Ahmadi, and I don't want people that feel that I'm, I don't want to misrepresent myself. So Akbar said, well, you should tell him. I said, you think I should tell him now? He said, yeah, you should tell him now. And as I'm going up to approach President Iyaz about representing me as an Ahmadi, and I'm trying to make the correction, and right at that moment, boom! It's like that. It was like something just charged me. It's just like, you've been praying this prayer all this time for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to place you where you should be, and now you have been represented as an Ahmadi. Is it that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling you that this is where you should be? And right then and there, I went up to Iyaz, Nasser Iyaz. I said, Mr. Iyaz, I said, you have represented me as an Ahmadi, and I'd like to let you know that I'm not an Ahmadi, but today I would like to accept Ahmadiyyat. And it was like, it still makes me a little bit emotional, because like it was like such a moment. It was such a moment where it's like someone's direction completely changes, come to its right point at the right time. And after all the things that I had started, that I learned through the studies of and I'm not talking about being a scholar, but just from the little bit that I could learn from the philosophy and teachings of Islam. I mean, the philosophy and teachings of Islam is at the foundation of this. You see, it is the core of all the things I started to learn about Islam through this journey, and coming into this March 23rd of 1991 from I would say from 1977, I think it was, no, 1977 or 1975, more or less, because 1975 is when I get in contact with Akbar, but 1977 is when I come back from Iran. And so all this is culminating into this one period, this crucial moment that brings me into Ahmadiyyat. And right then and there, my journey with Ahmadiyyat started 1975, but really manifested in March 23rd of 1991. And the questions that had been answered was the understanding that Jesus did not die on the cross, and the understanding that all the things that I had questioned about my Christian background had started to become answered in Islam. Islam was giving me the truth. All the lies that even I can't even call them lies. You see, this is where I have to draw that line. It's not lies. It's just misunderstandings. Misunderstandings because people had they hadn't been taught anything different. They hadn't known anything different. And I'm the one, by the grace and mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I'm the one that came to get a little bit of that light, you see. And this is another thing, because like I grew up, when I was growing up, I was growing up with a Baptist minister. My Aunt Gussie, may Allah be pleased with her, she would take me to church every time she would travel. We would stand out on the road in the cold mornings when I was like about I would say between 8 and 9 years old, and we would travel to the churches that she would have to go preach. And one of the little songs that she always taught me was that, like, this little light of mine, I'm going to let it shine. And so that little spark that had been lit in me from a child, that was still being nourished by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, manifested its brilliance on March 23rd, 1991. when Ahmadiyyat became my choice, my choice not by coercion, not because somebody was, in my face tablighin to me, morning, noon, and night. Only thing that was tablighin to me was what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was bringing in front of me every day, every day, changing me a little bit more every time. And on March 23rd of 1991, on Promised Messiah Day, the bayat was given to me by Mukhtar Chima, who was the missionary at the time in New York at Bir Tuzaffa. And that's how my journey in Ahmadiyyat began. And that's why I accepted Ahmadiyyat, because as a child and growing up in a Baptist church, we always said, I want to be in that number when Jesus come, when them saints come marching in. We want to be in that number when the second coming of Christ comes about. And I wanted to be present, because they said 2000. I said, oh yeah, I should be living around that time. When Jesus comes, I should be living around that time. So here we go. This is 1991. I don't have that much longer to go, but I come to find out that Ahmadiyyat represents the concept of the second coming of Christ. And all of this is coming down on me like, it's like a holy rain that's coming on me. And like, coming from my Baptist background, and then some of this Baptist might be coming out now a little bit, because, you know how Baptist ministers talk. But, it's true. It's like, it's part of my nature. It's part of my culture. It's part of my upbringing. And I don't look at coming from the Baptist community to be separate from, to be cut off from everything else that I have experienced in coming to Ahmadiyyat. I think it's a stepping stone for me. And it probably is a stepping stone for others who haven't made that leap because they haven't been exposed to it. But my exposure to what I have come to understand from the Baptist community coming into Ahmadiyyat is that concept of saying, you have come into that place where you were supposed to be as a Baptist Christian. This is where you're supposed to be once you understand the truthfulness of what had been questions in your heart and your mind from that time on can be satisfied now. You can be satisfied that you're in the right place when you come into Ahmadiyyat, because Ahmadiyyat not only is a place where all Christians should be, but for all religions, all of the religions should be in Ahmadiyyat. This is where it culminates. This is that path where all those streams should meet. I think about that concept of like the 12 places where it says in the Quran, and each tribe will know its place, its watering hole. This is it. You see, it comes together. This stream might have been put out in 12 places, but it comes from one source. And this source that it is being represented in Ahmadiyyat is that one source. And all of the other things that my Christian brothers and sisters, my Muslim brothers and sisters, because in the Shia Islam and in Sunni Islam, they're so close, but they're still so far apart from that prophetic teaching that that Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam had given them. And if they go back to the Hadith, when the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam says, like, there will come a time, and how the Hadith goes, that it would be that Islam will be as if it was on the path of a tyrant, or a kingship, and so forth and so on. But there will come a time when it will be back. It would be brought back to that concept as how it is among us and my companions now. And that concept is that it would be based on prophethood, you see. And this is where and I'm saying this loosely, don't quote me verbatim as to how the Hadith goes. Again, I'm not a scholar, but I don't need to be a scholar to be a believer. You see, and I think that's where a lot of people fall into problems. They think they got to be a scholar to be a believer. You don't have to be a scholar to be a believer. All you can do is you just need to know. You don't even have to know Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. You see, to be a believer. You see, Allah opens your heart to what He wants to guide you to. And this is where people have to listen to they have to Allah's talking to us. He's talking to us in so many ways. You know, for the people who want to see a sign, they got signs. For the people who want to have something else, they got that too. And if they want to have a concept of where they should be and understanding about the coming of the promised Messiah or the second coming of Christ, he's got that. It's got that too. Internet now, you can go to the internet and Google it. You see, you can Google it and say, where is the Imam Mahdi? You know, Ahmadiyyat is going to come up. So you can't miss it. You say you can't miss it.
It's on March 23rd of 1991. It's when I formally entered into the fold of Ahmadiyyat. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Even though my brother Akbar had always, referenced to me as being an Ahmadi before I had accepted Ahmadiyyat. He said signing Bayat was just a formality, but I had already been an Ahmadi ever since I had been introduced to the philosophy and teachings of Islam. So right after that, time moved forward. Khalifatul Masih Rabi Rahmatullahi came into New York that same year. Matter of fact, not that long after Promised Messiah's Day. And I remember they had put me on guard duty, and I was amazed by that, because here I am, a new brother, they don't know that much about me, and here I have this auspicious duty to be on guard duty with beloved Hazur. But it was a very interesting and interesting lesson for me during that stay that Hazur had come to America and had his American tour. And a desire came to me right after I had accepted Ahmadiyyat. And that desire was I needed to get to Qadian. And I recall that I was talking to some brothers about it, and one brother said, well, like Khalifatul Masih Sani Rahmatullahi said that when one endeavors to make a trip, there's a way that you should get the blessings, that you can bring in the blessings of Allah for that. And that was to get a container, small box, something like that, that you can put some money in to save for that particular endeavor, and write a Bismillah on inside of it, and then let life take its course. Now, I'm a believer in all of the things that happens in Islam. And this was taking it a little bit to the point I said, well, I don't know. I mean, I know how my finances were, and I didn't see that I was going to be able to, between the time that this desire had hit me, which was around about, I would say around about March, April, and then have it culminate so that I can make the Jalsa, or they get to Qadian in December, which was basically the Jalsa was going to take place in December. So I followed the instructions. So I got a little box. Actually was one of them kind of you ever see those big Easter eggs that they have, they put stuff in. So I had one of those, and I had just made it so that it would be my bank, and I just wrote Bismillah in it, and I put maybe about $5 in it, and I think the next day I had to take the $5 out. So anyhow, it went like that, and by the grace of Allah, I got to Qadian in 1991 in December, and not only did I have sufficient funds, but I also bought gifts and things like that with me so that I could give to whomever I came in contact with. Just as something just to just to show my love, that's all. And I recall that I had met Hazur on that occasion and had an opportunity to even speak at the Jalsa in Qadian. And it was one of those historic moments that I never forget. My guide and my counselor was a brother from California by the name of Jatala. Brother Jatala was, I mean, he was like an angel. It's all I can say to you. It's like he, kind of gave me all the insights about this historic moment, how that the Khalifa had not been to Qadian in 40 some odd years, and this was a fulfillment of a prophecy, and that I was a part of that prophecy, and all of the other things that came into play from that time. And it was a very spiritual time that I had there in Qadian. It's like I remember that when I was in Rabwa, because before I went to Qadian, was it? I'm trying to remember, but I recall that yes, before I went to Qadian, I had went to Rabwa, and in Rabwa, I came in contact with some very very spiritual personages, which I don't want to take up too much time to deliberate on this whole journey, because Ahmadiyyat is such a spiritual journey that everything that happens to you from the moment that you start to become that you embrace Ahmadiyyat, it's like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is guiding you more and more and more. And I recall that my dreams became more more spiritual, and the things that I was given in my dreams were more spiritual and profound. And all of these things took place in my life shortly after I had accepted Ahmadiyyat. So my concluding remarks on this is that Ahmadiyyat is the Sirat al-Mustaqim. It is the right path. For the Muslims who have expected that the Imam Mahdi and the promised Messiah alayhi salam was to arrive during this time, and they doubted that he'd arrived because from their own understanding they did not see that he had arrived based on their expectations. But I'm nobody special. I'm just an average man that maybe just had an open heart. And if I could be able to see the truthfulness of the promised Messiah, Hazrat Mirza Ghulam Ahmad alayhi salam, and accept him as the promised Messiah, and I had no background of Islam prior, I cannot even imagine how any Muslim, Shia or Sunni or any other sect could deny the truthfulness of the promised Messiah alayhi salam, who arrived on time. He wasn't late. So if whatever the Muslims, whatever is being sought after or looked for, they should wake up and understand that what they were looking for is here. And until they embrace the Imam Mahdi, the arbiter, the Messiah of this age, of this time, as promised by the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, then all of their endeavors, regardless of how well thought or how well intentioned, will not be successful. Not for a long term. So I say that to my fellow Muslims, brothers and sisters, and for my Christian brothers and sisters, the same understanding. 2,000 years was supposed to be after Jesus died, that he was supposed to come again. Okay? Now, we already covered a little bit about that death understanding, all right? Because Jesus didn't die on the cross. And if you want to get a real good understanding about it, you read the book Jesus in India, and I think it's The Breaking of the Cross. 2 books in Ahmadiyyat that you can get. And The Tomb of Jesus, The Tomb of Jesus by Brother Shams. So if you read those two books, that will give you enough to make you start to understand that there's something different than how you had been given it. You know, like we're coming through this stage now where, like, you know, we are in this very, very social upheaval here in America, where Black people, African American people, have felt that the systemic racism has been a plague that they have been under, that has been more destructive to them than the pandemic of coronavirus. And this systemic racism is basically the kind of things that are covered up, things that you don't even know that are being you're being subjected to. So I'd say this in the concept of that same thought, that the way that we had been taught Christianity is of the same ilk. You have to go back and unpeel all the things that you have been taught about to get to the truth, if you're brave enough. And I know my fellow Christians, I know how sincere your thoughts are about Nabi Isa, about Jesus Christ. I know. I was brought up in a Baptist home, in a Baptist community, that I mean, Jesus was a key word for everything. And I know how strong your faith are towards that concept. But let me just say this. If God said to you that there was something wrong with the way that you had been taught to understand this, and then you start to become even more resistant to God telling you that, what would that make you? And how would you feel about that if you had to meet God and he basically said to you, I had told you, I had given you so many signs, giving you so many ways that you could have understood this perfectly clear, but you refused to. So at the end of the day, as my Aunt Gussie used to say, it ain't about what I want to be, it's what God wants me to be. So think about that, my brothers and sisters from Christianity. And for my Jewish brothers and sisters, you see, there's another understanding that has to be taught and understood from your standpoint as well. When you are looking for the Messiah, or when you are looking for the chariot of fire to be returned, and on that chariot of fire would be the Masih. All of the taught, all of the teachers, all of the things that had been given to each one of the major faiths in the past ran into that fork in the road, whether they went this way or that way. And take it from the understanding that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tested you, God tested you in every stage of life to see whether you want to believe or whether you want to disbelieve. It's easy to disbelieve. Easy. You can believe anything. It takes a little effort to believe. And then not really that much if you're looking for truth and you know the truth when you feel it and when you see it. So to my Jewish brothers and sisters, the Messiah that you were looking for already came. That was Jesus Christ. You may not accept it, but it ain't about what I want you to accept. It's about what God wants you to accept. And that'll be your judge and decider. And then from that, everything else is just, it's open for you. Now's the time where all people need to come to the right path, to the path of truth. And all the signs point to the fact that the truth is there if you're looking for it. The Ahmadiyyat Muslim community is now over 120 years old, I believe. And if a community has overcome all the adversity that had been thrown in this way, and still thrive and flourish and grow with the, I mean, you really have to look into Ahmadiyyat. Ahmadiyyat is a magnificent citadel. I mean, it is a city, it is a nation, but you won't be able to see it from the outside. You have to see it from the inside. It's beautiful, beautiful. Love for all, hatred for none is the motto. And that motto is one that every man, woman, child, the world needs that. Love for all, hatred for none. When we look at all of the bitterness and all the discord that is among us, love for all, hatred for none shines through like a beacon. And it ain't hard. All you got to do is just embrace it. So, in my final remarks, I say all praises due to Allah, Lord of all the worlds. May He forgive me my sins, and may He accept my prayers and help me overcome my shortcomings. Assalamu Alaikum Rahmatullahi wa Barakatuh.
If you have not yet subscribed, make sure to subscribe and click on the bell icon so you can get notifications for every new video. Also make sure to like and comment on the video and follow on Twitter and Instagram.
سفينا صل على محمد